Hi, I'm Grant Nelson. This is my dog Bailey, and welcome to Mustache Off Grid. Boom! Got her! Hi guys, it's Grant Nelson again here with the Mustache Off Grid YouTube channel. In case you're new to the channel, I cover various off-grid and homesteading topics, and I live off-grid in southern Missouri in a one-room cabin, completely off the public utilities grid. Anyway, I'll just get straight into the topic today. First topic I was going to talk about is getting prepared for winter, and I was going to talk about some of the steps I'm taking, but it's something when you go out to the land. It's one of the #1 issues that causes homesteads and off-grid living, basically lifestyles, to fail, because people go out there and the cold weather comes in, the winter comes in, they don't have things insulated good enough, they don't have a wood stove set up, and they just aren't prepared. Or they go out to their land in the fall and they don't have time to get ready for winter. I recommend just probably your best option if you're planning on going off grid and you're dealing with a climate that has cold winters, or even mild winters like down here, is to go out there in the springtime. That's usually the best time. That way you have plenty of time to get things prepared, plenty of time to get ready for that first winter, because that first winter is really a test run to see where you're at as far as living off the grid. How sustainable and how sufficient is your lifestyle out there. And it's kind of funny, you know, to say, my first I've been out here 2 winters now, and every winter you get a little more prepared and a little more ready for it, and you make adjustments to make things a little bit better. Last year there was a storm, a winter storm, and there was a lot of wet ice, and it was sticking to all the power lines, and then it froze up overnight, and the whole county had their power out. I think it said 80% of the power in the county was out, and I don't have any power, and I had turned off my phone for a couple days because I knew that the winter weather was coming in, and my phone dies quick when it's cold out, and so I just decided to turn it off for a couple days. I was fully prepared for the storms coming in, and I was cozied up inside my cabin. You know, I had some tea, I was just reading and relaxing, and one of my neighbors pulled up to my gate, and I went up there and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they said, "Is everything going all right?" I said, "Oh, everything's going good. No problems out here." And I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Well," they said, "there's a power outage, and everyone's power's out." And I said, "Well," I said, "that's not good." I said, "I didn't even know. I had no idea. I don't have any power." So I didn't even know. You know, there had been a power outage for a day, and my neighbor was going around with a generator to you know, help people get their toilets flushed and help with their refrigeration and things like that. You know, help them with all the necessities that they have on the grid. He was going around and helping, and I didn't even know that there was a power outage or that anything was even going on, because I was connected. You know, I'm off the grid, and I don't have any on-grid connection, so I didn't even know. And it was just kind of a funny story, and you know, it kind of goes into some of the things I'm going to talk about later in this video a little bit as well. But figured that was just something to mention. You know, off the grid, you know, if you're prepared for it and emergencies and things like that happens, a lot of times you're so self-sufficient you don't even realize it. And it's kind of like the Great Depression and different things like that. You hear about all the travesty it caused and all the things like that, and um, depressions, recessions, and a lot of the country people, you know, barely even realized that it was going on during those times. Some did have some problems. You know, you had the Dust Bowl and things like that, but um, a lot of people just, they were already poor and they were already living off the land and they didn't even realize it. But you hear stories about that kind of thing. Anyway, I just figured I'd talk about some of the steps I'm preparing for winter that I took this year. My first year, I put insulation in my building. I had my building delivered, put in a wood stove, and I got ready for that first winter. I had some new blankets. I bought a bunch of blankets to make sure that I had enough warmth, cut wood. You know, that was really the first year off grid. And actually, I have a video about a winter storm. It's back in some of my older videos if you guys are interested in watching that. But I usually put some water inside my building and just to keep some de-thawed, because I keep my water in big tanks and they could freeze up hypothetically. So I usually keep enough to feed the animals and de-thaw things, and drink my coffee in the morning and fill up some jugs inside my building. So that's really helpful. That's one step I almost always take if I know a cold night's coming in. And actually, when you warm up that water inside your building, it also helps heat the building a little bit, because that water absorbs the heat and then it releases the heat. So it actually helps warm the building up a little bit too. Anyway, some of the steps I've took this year, obviously I'm always cutting firewood. I've been preparing my food. I'm, you know, doing some root celery and getting ready to pickle and can a few things. Also, in my building, I'm looking at putting a little more insulation in, but I'm not going to use modern insulation. I'm actually going to use blankets from the store, and I'm just putting it on the ceiling because it's a sheet metal roof and it seems kind of thin and it releases a lot of heat, and it stays above freezing in there for the most part. But it'd just be a little more comfortable if it was just a little bit warmer in the wintertime. So I'm putting some blankets. I think I'm going to tack some blankets on the ceiling. And I think that'll help with the insulation. And worst case scenario, I have extra blankets for warmth as well. So that's one thing I'm planning on doing. And I might make a video on that to show you guys. Also, this year I've gotten a second IBC tote water tank. There's the 270. Here's what I'm talking about, guys. This is the IBC tote. 5-gallon tanks that I fill up to use for my water. They work great, and they're a good starter option if you're going off grid. And they're starting to get a little more pricey as more people start to go off grid. I think there's a lot more people using those water totes. At the feed store, they were $120, and I said, man, that's pretty high. But I went on Facebook Marketplace and I found some food grade ones for $60, and that was probably the best deal on there. But as far as it goes, Facebook Marketplace can be a real asset if you're looking for used items to use off grid, chainsaws, lawnmowers, things like that. You know, it's just something to think about. You don't need to buy everything new. A lot of the used stuff you can get on Facebook Marketplace can save you quite a bit of money if you're trying to do off-grid stuff on a budget, and Craigslist and garage sales and flea markets, things like that. But kind of off topic, but I just figured I'd mention that. It's kind of a tip for someone that's going off-grid that might help them if they're looking for supplies and things like that. And in a local area, they could get some things cheap at a significant discount. And I saved, you know, $60 on that water tote just by looking. You know, it's the same distance and everything I would have to bring it to travel. So I'm also putting a damper in my fireplace. I didn't have a damper the last 2 years, and I think that that's going to help warm it up a little bit in there, because usually it burns full bore and the logs will last all night. But I think a damper is going to help keep the heat in just a little better. So I'm putting a damper on my fireplace, and you're always going to have some preparation going into the winter time, and you're always going to have some preparation when you know a big winter storm's coming in, or when you know that uh, cold temperatures are coming in. See, out here we're lucky, and we're blessed, and our average winter temps are about 40 degrees. Usually it's about 30 degrees, 40 degrees. Some days you might get up into the 60s and 70s once in a while, which is a nice change up, and I love the winter weather out here. But when cold temperatures are coming in where it's going to hit 0 or it's going to be in the teens, you kind of are aware of that and kind of make preparations for it. And if you're in a northern climate, you're going to have to take even greater steps, for preparing for the winter. Thicker insulation, bigger fireplace, more wood. So just keep that in mind. We also only get about 3 months of real hard winter, maybe less than that even. It just depends. So, but anyway, that's just a couple tips, a couple of the steps I'm taking this winter to get ready. A couple adjustments that I've made, like the second tank, and sometimes the tank freezes up in the wintertime, and when it freezes up, you wake up in the morning and you want to make some coffee or something. You go to get some water, and it's frozen, and it's just a pain. And you got to de-thaw it, and usually I use one of these propane torches to de-thaw it. And anyway, I usually use one of those propane torches to de-thaw it. These are a good item to have off-grid. I also use them to sterilize and clean the rabbit cages. I take a grill brush and clean the cages, and then after I clean them and I have all the stuff off, I go through and I take that thing and burn everything in there off, and then I scrub it again with the grill brush, and it helps kind of sterilize it, and it's a good way to clean your rabbit cages. You can de-thaw water in it. It's a good emergency fire starter. If you are a smoker, it can be a good, it's basically a giant lighter. I don't condone smoking, but it's just one of those things, just kind of a joke, guys. But anyway, they're handy to have off-grid. You can get a couple canisters. They're pretty affordable. And if you're in an area with the cold temperatures, those can be really handy. I've had to, up in Illinois where I'm from, I've had to go out to the metal water spigots for livestock, and they're froze up. So I take one of those and de-thaw them. And if you've got those metal farm spigots and you get them and it's frozen up or stuck, that can be something to warm it up and de-thaw it. So it's a handy thing to have. It's a good emergency fire starter. It's a good, like I said, way to de-thaw the tanks if you've got frozen water. It's a pain for me to de-thaw them because I take, usually I have a big rain catchment. It's about 500-gallon cattle tank that I have for rain catchment. I water my trees and garden and things like that out of that. But I have to crack that on those mornings that it's frozen up, get some water out of there, boil it, and I put that under the spigot to de-thaw the spigot, and then I go around it with this thing and kind of de-thaw it. And obviously it's plastic, so it can melt it, so you kind of got to be careful de-thawing it like that, and it's just a pain. The whole thing's a pain, so that's why I've gotten the second tank. I figure I'll fill up one tank, and if it gets frozen, the spigot, I can de-thaw it and stuff, and I will. But I also have the second tank that I can just fill up that day, and it'll make things a lot easier than just having one singular tank. And the ground has geothermal temperatures, so your well water shouldn't freeze up, generally speaking. What was I going to say about it? But yeah, I mean, water is important, especially in the winter time. You might have to dethaw water. You need to have a plan for keeping your water dethawed off grid. So that's a whole nother thing. And yeah, but anyway, also I'm talking about all these preparations you take for wintertime. And I talked about the story earlier about how it was wintertime and we had that storm come in and all the power was out, and I had no idea the power was out. It was about 2 or 3 days, and I was just cozied up in my house. I kind of just figured it was going to be just like up in Illinois when a snowstorm comes in. You just stay inside and be comfortable for a few days, but just go outside to do the minimum required activities. But um, anyway, talking about that story, there's this thing with homesteading, and there's a kind of a compare contrast, kind of a debate between prepping and homesteading. And I'm not against prepping or homesteading. I'm for both of them. I think that the number one prep you can have is a homestead, but there's a debate between them, and talking about emergencies and being prepared for events and natural disasters and things that happen, and being prepared for a day that you might not be able to go to town. Um, Living off grid on a homestead, um, certain emergencies that happen, like for example that snowstorm with the electricity out, certain emergencies that happen, um, you don't even notice them. If you're living off grid, if you're disconnecting your ties to society, and you know, I think they kind of work together in a way, because naturally on a homestead, you're a little bit more prepared for things like that. And rural and country living people and homesteaders and farmers, generally speaking, are always a little more prepared for those things. They buy things in bulk from the store. They buy things from the store because they don't want to make trips to town, and they have them on hand. They don't. They try to keep things on hand so they don't have to go and get them from town. Maybe they see a deal on motor oil. They might buy it in bulk and say, "Oh, that's good. I'm going to do the oil changes anyway." So they buy the motor oil in bulk because it's a good deal, and keep it in the back of their barn somewhere. And when they do their own oil changes, they have that oil on hand. And that's just kind of an example. But there's other examples as well. But um, it's one of the best ways to be prepared is living rurally on a homestead, on a farm, or even off grid like I do, which it's an off grid homestead. But I think it's kind of the number one prep, and I think naturally as a homesteader, you're prepping. Um, you don't even realize it, but you are. When you're growing bulk amounts of food. With your water, for example, I have a well, and I also have a rain catchment tank that I talked about. And then you might have a river or a pond or something like that as well. But generally speaking, off grid, you're always looking to have a few different options for things, just so it's more reliable and you're more self-sufficient. And that's part of being prepared too. If the well went out, the well pump went out, I still have rain catchment, there's ponds, things like that. And a person that's homesteading or going off grid is generally going to work towards having multiple options for things. And they're going to use the best option, but if something happened to the best option, they have backup options. And that's part of being self-sufficient, is having those backup options. And I talked about that too with your winter preparedness. Having a backup option, which is probably going to include getting out of Dodge, going to town and getting to some climate control if you're not prepared for winter and you're going to freeze to death out there. Like, but yeah, I mean, talking about it, I think there's a conflict and a contrast. I don't think it's necessarily bad or good. It's just a debate, and I think they kind of work together. And I kind of think that you naturally, as a homesteader, you're going to be a little more prepared if something were to happen than um, if you lived in town. And that's part of the reason I kind of think a homestead is the number one prep to have, is a small farm or homestead. It's probably the most expensive prep, but it's probably the number one prep. Um, anyway, you know, I'm not a prepper channel or anything like that. I consider myself a homesteading and off-grid channel, but they do kind of tie together in a way. And I'm not against prepping or anything. My channel's about self-sufficiency, homesteading, and that kind of stuff, and not the prepping stuff. And it's not about the apocalyptic scenarios or, you know, SHTF and all that stuff. It's about homesteading and off-grid living and farming, basically. And that kind of gets into one of my next topics I was going to discuss here, and that is why I promote the outdoors on my channel. As far as it goes, I know that if everything on grid was cut off, that I could live out here on the land, probably pretty comfortably with all the wildlife and the deer and the wild plants and things like that. I could live. It wouldn't be a comfortable existence. It'd be, you know, pretty hard, but I could survive out here for, I believe with my survival skills, I believe I could survive out here forever, basically till my death. But that being said, I think being off-grid, there's a lot of channels that are farming channels, homesteading channels, which I like. I'm not against that. I'm for that. And there's a lot of channels that are outdoors, you know, going up in Alaska, logging, you know, being, you know, out in the wilderness kind of. And I try to combine the two. On my channel and my homestead, I kind of consider myself almost like a hybrid homestead. Um, that being said, the reasoning for that is because I know, talking about the backup options, like I talked about the backup options that you might have with water, but also if there was a disease outbreak in my animals. I raise sheep, rabbits, chickens, and pigeons. If there was a disease outbreak and all my sheep died, well, I've got rabbits. If there was a disease outbreak and all my rabbits died, well, I've got sheep. I'm diversified there. And if something happens to one of my livestock, I've got other ones that could make up for that. And I have backup. I have options on my meat sources. And I consider the land and hunting and fishing and trapping another option as far as food and meat sources go. So if something were to happen to all my farm animals, I have the land that I could live off of as well. And it's a good supplement to your homestead. You can get all your food, water, and shelter straight from the land. If you do that too long, though, you might kind of run it out. You might overdo it. So I try to practice conservation. And that being said, though, talking about having options, if the government were to come and seize all my farm animals and tell me I couldn't farm, I have the outdoors. You know, I could trap and hunt and fish to get some food and meat, and I have a backup option. Also, if I couldn't get the animal feed from the store right now, the land's a backup option, and I have. It's something that you have, that you're having multiple options for where your food and where your living comes from. If you're living off grid, kind of like I talked about the water and the other things as well, but. That's part of the reason I promote the outdoors. I think it's a great self-sufficiency move. I think it's good to know those skills. Some of them go hand in hand. Like I talked about the trapping and it being important for predator control and conservation. Honestly, a lot of those animals carry disease and they get overpopulated in a small area, and the area is above its carrying capacity. And usually when that happens, there's more disease in the wildlife and other things like that. And keeping those populations in check is actually important. But they kind of work together. Even like foraging, like I talked about, I have a video on my prickly pear cactus that I grow. And I found that cactus wild, and then I planted it on my property. And even the foraging and wildlife, you know, foraging kind of works with the homesteading and gardening and farming as well. They kind of work hand in hand together, in my opinion. And if you're trying to be self-sufficient, it's good to have options, and it's good to have skills. And I know that I could live directly off the land, but I'm trying to make it a little more comfortable and raise my own stuff and make it a little bit easier. And it's also a little bit, it's just as enjoyable, because I do love the outdoors. And there's a lot of natural human instincts that come out when you're out there hunting, fishing, trapping, that most people that live in town don't always experience. I mean, rarely experience, actually. But there is human instincts out there in the woods that kind of come naturally to you, and it feels good. It feels good to use your natural human instincts. But that's part of the reason I promote the outdoors on my channel. I think it's important to pass those things on to the younger generations, and even the older generations that don't know. And I think it's important to have options, and that's part of the reason I promote the outdoors. You have an option to get food from the land, and you have an option to grow food from the land. You've got two options there. Anyway, that's just kind of some of the rambles today, guys. Hope this helps someone that's looking to go off grid. I just want to thank you all for watching. God bless. And if you're new to the channel and you enjoy the videos and the content, it'd be really helpful if you'd like and subscribe to the channel. But if you don't, you know, it's a free country. Have a great rest of your day. God bless, and thank you for watching. Sit. Sit. Come on, sit. Oh, good boy. Good boy. Lay down. Lay down. All right. Good boy. Hey, guys, let's make Bailey famous. Let's make Bailey famous. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mustache Off Grid. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and God bless. Let's make Bailey famous, guys.